Up to this point, Carol's just been kind of like riffing it. Let me just like see what works. And it doesn't, and it fails miserably. Now she's like, okay, let me actually like gather information. And she's methodical about it.
This whole journey is her bitter chrysalis.
She wants to do to them what they want to do to her, which is she wants to turn them without their permission. They're saying no. They say they don't want, they say they want this. And she's like, I know better.
Today, Sterling and I are talking about the hit science fiction TV show on Apple TV, Pluribus, Episode 4, Please Carol.
So spoilers are ahead.
We are discussing that opening scene with our man from Paraguay, Manousos.
That interesting middle portion where Carol finally gets answers to questions she has from an unlikely biker.
And the development and implementation of Carol's master plan.
And if you're enjoying these breakdowns, then please consider joining us on November 24th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time as we have our first of 2 live Q&As about Pluribus to discuss theories, ideas, and questions you may have about the show up to this point.
So let's jump into the episode.
Why don't we jump into the very beginning of the episode as we meet a new character? I know we kind of saw, we heard from him a little bit, but we finally got to actually see Manousos. So what are your thoughts on this kind of intro and getting to learn this new character?
First off, another banger of an intro. I love that we have very minimal dialogue. It's just kind of taking a peek on this guy, seeing how he's dealing with everything, and seeing, I do feel like he is as closely related to Carol as any of the other non-joined people. And so, maybe he's a little bit farther than Carol, which is great, which I think he could be a big help for Carol. And I just love that it told so much about what he's been going through in such a little amount of time. And it was, again, all show, don't tell. We see he's boarded up the windows so they can't see him. He's checking radio frequencies one by one, very meticulously,
very methodically,
trying to see if there's anybody else like there that's reaching out to him. And I thought it was a truly great introduction to see his struggles, how much he distrusts the joined. And I loved it.
It's interesting because I think that he is in some ways the closest to Carol, but I think in other ways he is very opposite of Carol. So with Carol, it's funny how principled Carol acts, like she gets on her high horse and she wants to have agency and she doesn't want to be forced into the collective, but then she ends up doing something, without Zosha's consent. So it's like she pretends to have these principles, but she doesn't actually. And then we see him, and I think that he seems to have very strong convictions and very strong principles. For 4 days, he's eaten almost nothing. And when he finally resorts to breaking into, other people's storage units, it's literally because he's starving. And he creates a note saying that they will get restitution, so instead of just feeling like, what I'm doing is okay, and so I'm not worried about it, he still understands that what he's doing is like technically wrong. And so he's planning on making it up to these people. And so I think these are going to be interesting foils to each other. Once again, there are similarities in that he is not trusting the others. But then there's also these like very big differences.
I do see that there are differences between them, but I do also see that they have a shared goal of wanting to make things right in the world. And I think that with him writing that note, like he has the understanding that they're all joined, but the writing of that note is like his almost like promise to himself that he's like, the world will get better. This will get fixed. And so I will need to apologize to the people once this has been corrected. At least that's how I kind of took it. And I think that, he is great at sending a message to the joined. He goes out and purposely knocks over the food to show like, hey, I'm not interested. And which this whole idea of the joining, like offering him food, is something. The way I was thinking about it is like, if you were like a caretaker of an animal, right, that was scared and didn't trust you, the best way to like build that trust is through primary reinforcement, which is food. And so I did get this little vibe of that he is this like untrusting, you know, like, I wouldn't say like the joining is like a hive mind. They know everything. They're like,
Yeah.
maybe some would say that they are like a higher intellect being because they have so much knowledge, versus our guy from Paraguay, which I forget his name.
Manousos.
Manousos is more of like a scared critter. And so they're trying to warm up to him by giving him food. And I think that this is also exemplified by like showing that he is kind of like in a cage. He's like caged off from them.
Yeah.
Like, so seems to me like a little animal at the shelter that you're trying to earn his trust through primary reinforcement. And I thought that that was an excellent choice for introducing this character.
That's a great analogy, because I've definitely, as a kid, my mom has saved pets that have, been outdoors, and the way that she's engendered that trust is by like never making them feel uncomfortable by like going to them, but instead, starting off with like the food and just kind of being present through like a window or whatever, and then like slowly bit by bit kind of getting closer as they, come to trust that food source and become to kind of rely on it. And so that is clever. It's funny because at times they seem aware of like how they are perceived by others. And so it seems like they're trying not to push too hard with him. But then other times they seem kind of blissfully unaware, like when they, and I'll talk about this later, but like when they come over the cop car radio with Carol, like she would prefer minimal contact. But I don't know, maybe with her, they understand that like she's begrudgingly accepted that this is the current state of affairs. Even if she's long-term planning on fixing it, she hasn't like completely turned away contact like he has. So like
right.
The door is open, and they're inserting themselves a little bit more.
Well, and I think that with Carol, she's reached out to them. Like she'll like be like, "Don't talk to me. I don't want anything to do." And then she's like, "Well, how about you put my sprouts back? And how about you do this?" And like, "Oh, okay. Well, how about bring me a grenade?" Like, she keeps doing these things that like is telling them like, "Hey, you can keep contacting me. Like, yeah, I'm going to be annoyed about it, but eventually I give in and then talk to you." And I think the cop car was a great example for that.
Yeah. I loved in this opening, we got to see some moments from the trailers and teasers, like I think there was one of the teasers showed Manousos licking the can, the lid of the can. And the music when he is breaking into the units was used in one of the main teasers or trailers. I don't remember exactly which one. And for me, I absolutely love how it feels almost like Vince Gilligan is like playing 4D chess, where it's like not only was he thinking about how to make a great show, but it almost feels like he has these beautiful moments that are perfect for teasers and trailers where they can like reveal something without actually revealing it. Because like going back to some of these moments, seeing them in the trailers, they were such WTF moments, like seeing the dude licking the can lid. It's like, what the hell is going on? And so it both was revealing something, but because we didn't have like the bigger context, it also was revealing nothing.
Right. How desperately hungry is Manousos? Yeah.
And like it just seemed like similar to like the donut licking. It was like this weird, creepy thing, but now you see the reasoning behind it. And I don't know, I feel like so many other trailers just like give up major plot points in order to attract you in. And this had like these interesting moments that didn't really give anything away. And I love that it used like music from the show, because that's another thing that like trailers and teasers do, is they'll oftentimes use the same stuff as like all the other trailers and teasers, stuff that's not in the show. Oftentimes there's like a song that's like specifically has a like ticking sound. So it like creates this like, like ticking time bomb feel of like, oh my God, something's about to happen.
Builds tension. Yeah.
It builds tension, but it's not actually in the show. And I just love that like all of this stuff is in here. And it was cool kind of seeing the other side of that. And similar to that, like cool seeing the other side of Carol's phone call, because seeing how desperate he is that he's eating dog food and like it's making him like gag, and he has to like choke it down, and his hunger, his starvation is far outweighing like his gag reflex. But it also kind of makes sense maybe why he was like so angry and like really hanging up the phone mid-sentence. I mean, he probably would have done it regardless, but this is like an extra reason of like he's at his potentially like his lowest moment.
Yeah. And so that was one of my qualms with this episode.
Okay.
Because just him reacting.
Was it that you've had dog food before and it's not that gross and you're like,
it's not that bad. Listen, whatever they say, Big Food wants you to think that dog food's not good. Dog food is good. If you could just put something under here that says, I do not endorse eating dog food, that would be great. But I do think that when you are that hungry, like when you are missing certain nutrients, like the dog food might repulse you mentally. But I think that when you are so hungry, like even dog food's going to taste good. Like, so ultimately, I think watching him kind of choke it down, that was my one little hang up of the opening. Other than when he's searching these frequencies, he's not putting out a radio message. So like, if he's not putting out a radio message, how is he expecting other people to be putting out a radio message? What if it's another guy sitting somewhere going through each frequency and being like, oh, nothing on this one? So I think he should add a message, but understandably why he doesn't. But
that also like fits in potentially with his character, where, initially the others didn't even know that he existed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that I think unlike Carol, who was like quick to jump in and do things, right? Like day one, she's like, I want to meet all the English speakers,
Mm-hmm.
before she even like really had a plan together. She was like, let me at least like jump into something. And he's more of like methodical and like trying to figure out what the situation is before he gives up his move.
Yeah, and I think that is very much highlighted with his interaction with Carol, which also loved that they connected it. I felt like the scene as a whole tied into the rest of the story by showing that interaction. And you can see his frustration with the phone calls, that he's over it. He's annoyed with these people. He doesn't trust them. And then it wasn't until that Carol called him back and swore at him, then he was like, oh shit, like she's like me and potentially she can help me. Because that's essentially what he's doing. He's looking for others that are on turn. And he found it with that phone call. And so now seeing his gears turn of like, okay, Carol, Sturka, how am I gonna, now I'm very curious about like where he is gonna go forward with this. Like, he doesn't trust these people. He probably doesn't want to leave. How is he going to get in contact with Carol again? How are they going to meet up? What are they going to do together? And I think it's got potential to be very interesting.
I really liked seeing him write her name down, because I originally thought that she was going to go to him, but I think that she's written him off at this point. And seeing that, of learning, oh, she actually could be one of the good ones. Like, in seeing that she's bad, he sees that she's good. Or at least unturned, Right.
Which is, in his mind, one of the good ones.
Right. And so I loved that little thing. And it's cool kind of, learning things the way that the characters in this show learn things. Like some of this stuff is very high level stuff, and I feel like it could be, the easy way out would be to have like a doctor, a scientist, kind of explaining some of the tougher points so that they're like easy to sink in. And instead, Vince Gilligan has allowed some of these things to be confusing, allowed them to like, not be completely explained. And we learn them by seeing what the characters in the world are seeing and learning it the same way that they do, which does also mean that, there are going to be people that may misunderstand things, or, Vince may be open to the fact that like, hey, it's your interpretation. So whatever you think happened, that's what happened. But I like that because it makes you feel like you are really there as part of the journey and like figuring it out with them instead of just like watching, and having some smart dude being like, let me explain how this virus thing works,
I mean, I feel like that's a testament to great writing, where it's like,
Yeah.
we feel like we can put ourselves into these characters and understand what they're going through as we're learning what they're learning. And so I think that's just a testament to good writing.
And I think a great example of that is this next section, as we get into Carol and as she questions one of the others and like starts to figure out more information of them. I absolutely love this kind of section of the show.
I agree. I feel like it brought up so many more questions. I have so many ideas and questions. And like, okay, so first, I just want to pose this to you before we get into her conversation with Larry.
Okay.
She recognizes the mayor.
Yes.
Okay. In this recognition of the mayor, he says, thank you for your vote. And this, I know this is kind of like a throwaway moment potentially, or does it give us more clue that maybe these people, the joining are not as joined as we think, right? So like, if they're all the same mind, right? Thank you for your vote wouldn't really mean anything, right? Like that version of that guy is basically Soja, is basically Larry, is basically every person that she's met so far. So why would that specific guy thank her for her vote unless potentially there is a little bit of individuality in each of these joined people still? Because he thanked her.
Yeah. It's so hard to tell. I can't tell if they are, I go back and forth on this. There's the question of like if they're individuals or not. And I think that sometimes I've thought about the fact that they talk about people in the past tense when they've died, like Helen. And so it does seem like they potentially are gone. And I have thought about, well, maybe you aren't just like the sum of your memories, the sum of your experiences. And maybe to a certain extent, you're also like the way that your brain has been wired from your lifetime of living. And so when a body dies, there will never be that exact combination that thinks like that. Like even if they're able to, combine all of their thoughts. And so in the end, they kind of like work off of the median. They do still have potentially individuals running it. And so I do wonder about something like that. Also, it does feel a little bit bleak if we can never get anybody back. If this is like the end for, 8 billion people. I know a bunch of them have already died, unfortunately, but,
Right.
if this is like the end for them and there's literally only 13 survivors left. But then, I don't know, there's other things like the way that Larry talks that kind of like he's so hesitant about calling himself Larry. So I go back and forth on it.
Okay, I do too. And I actually had this idea with Helen, and I kind of brought it up in a previous one where I said, if Helen did join the collective, wouldn't she be part of the collective? Couldn't she just like talk to Helen at that point?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so with that, with the comment with the mayor, how she's been referring to Helen,
Yeah.
it does make me feel like, say, if Larry or Soja died, then that being, like, once they die, they come back to that individuality. And so, like, if you think of like who Soja was before the joining, and if she were to die, like say from the grenade, then it's like that connected tissue where she is part of the collective is there, but when she dies, it's removed. So like weirdly, they are all connected, but they all do have an individuality. I don't know. I do think that it might be relevant later. It might come up where once we get to know a little bit more of some of the joined characters individually, if they die, they would be removed completely. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I also kind of go back and forth on some other aspects of it, like whether or not they are lying by withholding information, because it certainly doesn't seem like they can actually lie with their words, but they can, they can certainly be misleading by not sharing certain information, which I think is kind of a lie. Or if it's like another theory I potentially have is it not that they are lying by omission, but the things that they are holding back are things related to negative emotions, and they really struggle with processing these. And so it's not that they are purposefully not sharing it to like withhold information, but instead it is, literally painful for them to access this stuff. And so they are avoiding it for themselves, not avoiding sharing it, to like hide things from her. Even potentially like the thing about, and we'll get into it, but like even potentially the thing about whether or not they can turn themselves back might be something that like is very painful for them to think about.
Even think, yeah.
And so like, so they can't tell her about it.
It's like a self-preservation tactic.
Right. And she said that. She was like, I can't share that information. She wasn't like, I don't want to. She said, I can't. So I go back and forth on it.
Well, and going back to the idea of like Helen and how Helen is joined, like, which might lend a little bit more credence to the theory that she's not, that once she's gone. Like she's like that entity is not there. But like once she joined a little bit, they have all the memories, right? They have all of like, so they have Helen's memories from when she was little all the way to when she died. So they have the full version of Helen that they could be like, I am Helen because I can speak through all my memories. But they even consciously, and I don't know if it's just to not stress out Carol, but they do consciously refer to her as she thought this.
Right.
It's not, you know, Carol's mind thinks this. It's she believed this, so I don't know.
It's wild. I think that, I keep feeling things like that maybe they have some like sinister agenda going on, and maybe they're, purposefully lying through omission. And it always feels like there's something evil that they could possibly do. But I do wonder if, Vince was completely honest when he said that the twist is that there is no twist, and that there's just something so weird, so off about like total honesty and like total benevolence that we're just like wired to wonder, okay, well, like, but what do you really want? Like, what are you really trying to do? Is that just like, is that our cynicism?
Right.
And potentially they really are like as benevolent as they are saying. They really are as honest as they are saying, and they don't have any kind of hidden agenda. I love this conversation. I loved having Carol learn so much through Larry. For me, this was like a big turning point, Like I think that up to this point, Carol's just been kind of like riffing it, like let me just like see what works. And it doesn't, and it fails miserably. And now she's like, okay, let me actually like gather information. And she's methodical about it.
Yeah. Well, so I agree. And I feel like this is the first time we're seeing Carol take affirmative action. Like I wouldn't say she was completely passive in the previous episodes, she did want to speak to the English speakers, but she had to rely on everything from the joining, right? Everything that she was doing relied on the joining. And I feel like this is the first time we're seeing take action on how to solve this on her own. She's like taking it into her own hands, and she's coming up with everything she knows about them and why it's important, how she can use that information to change them or to get back at them.
It actually feels like she's putting together an actual plan, because in the past it was, very much like seat of her pants. And, so like that first action she took, it's not that it was like a non-action, but it was she has no information. She doesn't really understand the joining. She doesn't really understand the others. And just like her gut reaction is, what if we put our heads together, then we'll have like the best chance of winning. So let me just get the heads together. But she doesn't have a plan.
Right.
And I think that's possibly part of why she kind of failed, is like she just went in there with the assumption that they were going to want the same thing as her.
Right.
And that they would work to help her. And it was such a wake up call of like, no, that's not what they want.
Right.
Not everybody's like you. Not everybody's cynical and sees this world as this terrible place. And so now it's like, okay, let me gather intel.
Yeah.
And see how I can use that. And so we see her craft her first like plan from this intel. But I loved the conversation and like the probing questions.
Oh yeah. I feel like, because she, in her first assessment, she was like, they're weirdly honest, but like didn't realize that they couldn't fully lie. And her probing, and I think, it was kind of a double-edged sword using Helen to like get information. Like I feel like that could open just like a whole box of like, it's only been a few days since she lost Helen, and like to like hear how Helen truly felt about her books, about Waikaro, her book that she just told her to release, and like, but it also helped her realize that they cannot lie to her. Like they will tell her the truth. And so I don't know if deep down, like Carol knew this, that maybe Helen didn't like these books and just was placating her because she loved her. But one quick side note, I do have a question. Who is Val? This is the second time we've heard of Val.
I don't think I remember the name and the reference.
So,
I assume like Val is maybe like the publisher or something like that.
Maybe, but when they were in the ice towers, she was asking Helen about the numbers, and she said, I talked to Val, these are the numbers. And so it's like, okay, like, but it seemed like Helen kind of talked to Val behind Carol's back a little bit. And so it seemed like there might be a little distrust there. And then with this one, she's talked to Val again and said it would be fine to release it. Like I don't think Helen does not care about Carol, because ultimately Larry said Helen didn't think that this would hurt your career. Like, and it would make you happy. So it was like, Helen clearly has Carol's interests at heart. But there is still something about this Val character who might show up later.
Yeah. I think that Helen is a buffer for Carol. And Helen tried to protect Carol from the things that she knew that would hurt Carol. I think that Carol is a person who has had a very difficult past. We've definitely finally seen part of that. I absolutely loved this learning about Freedom Falls.
Same.
And I'd actually theorized something like this. Not that it was a conversion camp, but I said that she, somebody in the comments asked, like, why didn't she reach out to any of her family? And I said, like, I think she probably wrote her family off. I think that there was like a falling out. And here we go. We find out that there was a falling out, and that she, I think that probably happened with like her whole family. And so I think this is just the first thing we're learning about her past that's been extremely negative. I think there's been more. Whether or not we learn about those other things, we'll see. But I think there's been a lot more that's made her this like callous person who expects the worst from everything. And I think that Helen works hard to try to like steer Carol towards the positives.
Mm-hmm.
So like the numbers come in and they're not, she knows that Carol doesn't want to, like Carol will be unhappy with these numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So she keeps them to herself. And when she is pushed into sharing them, she tries to like obfuscate by saying like, you're top 20. And
High
Carol
20?
sees through that and
Low
she's
20?
like closer to 10 or closer to 11 or closer to 20, you know?
Right.
So I think that's what it is. I don't think there's anything nefarious. I think it's like
No. I'm just curious if we will get more Val or if like I said, I don't think Helen was doing anything like shady with Val. I'm more curious of like, since Val has been mentioned twice and not like, oh, the publisher said this or the publisher, like they've been given a name and we've heard it twice, makes me feel like we'll see Val again. Cause it seems like Carol and Val probably have a relationship of some sort because she's on a first name basis. So having Val re-enter Carol's life, who would probably be the closest person to her other than Helen, might create some interesting dynamics with the joining as well. And potentially learn other things, and that maybe Val and Helen did have a secret relationship. I'm not saying that. I don't think that. But another cool metaphor is the title of her book that she wants to release. Do you know what it was called?
Yeah. It was Bitter Chrysalis.
Bitter Chrysalis. Okay.
Yeah.
So my thought, this whole journey is her bitter chrysalis, right? So like a chrysalis is basically a cocoon. It's when a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. And so like imagine this like grubby, cynical little worm who bitterly gets into a chrysalis to transform into a happy, beautiful butterfly. And so potentially that could be a metaphor for Carol's existence in the joining.
Yeah, I thought that Bitter Chrysalis, and I don't remember what the book was, but there was a book that was referenced in that first episode that Helen said she never got through reading it. And it's a book that is notoriously difficult to read and like notoriously something that a lot of people haven't finished reading and they've just kind of like read the cliff notes of it. And that to me felt like a metaphor for Carol as well, where it's like, I think that people generally agree as a whole that it's like, this is like such a great book. But at the same time, so few people can actually stand like consuming it. And I think that's like kind of like Carol, where it's like she's this great person inside. Like there is greatness to her, but she's also very difficult to be around. The reason I really like the like Freedom Falls one was because like for me it had like this like double entendre where it could be a great name for a camp, you know, where it's like a lot of things will be named after something in nature, like, you know, a waterfall. So it's like there's probably like a waterfall there and it's referencing that. But to me, as an unintended double entendre, probably not what they would want to like actually have people think is it's like it is the fall of your freedom as you like give in to their ways of thinking of like making yourself more like everybody else, you know?
Right. Like
and
your
so,
individuality freedom is gone.
Right.
You're all working for the collective.
Yeah, I thought it was like an unintentionally horrible name for a camp like this, but like also very appropriate.
Yeah, no, I thought so too. Like when she first said Freedom Falls, I was very much like, okay. I thought she was talking about the joining. Like at first it didn't really hit me that she was talking about, you know, this conversion therapy camp. So I had taken it like, okay, she knows, like now that she's learned that they can be disjoined, that maybe their freedom as a joined one is going to fall. Like I was very confused when she first said it.
It was the typical Vince Gilligan thing of like doing something that like puts you on your back foot, kind of like confuses you. And you've got to like just wait patiently until you figure out what it means. You know, I can see how this type of storytelling can be something that some people don't enjoy. You know, like I think there are some people that want to consume things to turn their mind off. And I think this like asks you to be active, like to pay close attention, and it's not going to spoon feed you. And if you're like, farting around on your phone, especially since there's like so little dialogue in some parts,
Yeah.
if you miss something like a key visual, it can like completely change your perception. I'm curious on your thoughts of like some of the things we learned from this conversation with Larry. Do you think that they were being honest when they said that they love her books as equally as, Shakespeare's best works?
After watching that conversation, I do feel like they are like, there is this like genuine wholesomeness to the joining and like their ideas of stuff. And I could see them, they take in the context of all of the written works, right? Mm-hmm. And all of the art that is out there. And so if every person in the world can experience this art, like they use Moira as an example for her Winds of Waikaro, where because the books made such a difference to her and because she is now part of them, it does feel like the books make a difference to them. And I could see this interesting aspect of that, like they are not able to create really individual art anymore. And so I could see them very much valuing what individual art was created beforehand. And so somebody in the collective, maybe their favorite work is Shakespeare. So they love Shakespeare. And Moira, whose favorite work is Waikaro, loves Waikaro. So like, I think both can be true, that they can like it just as much. Not that it is the level of writing, if you're going to measure it in that statistic, but the measure of the individual writing it, the expression of the individual is what they measure. And that to them is more valuable than what the content is.
But it seems like it is positive expressions that they're now making their opinions based off of. Because there has to be somebody who bought the book, borrowed it from the library, borrowed it from a friend, whatever, that read it and is like, this is absolute trash.
This is garbage.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem like any of those opinions have factored into this. And so my first read on it, when I like first watched this, I was like, they are lying by omission. They're like cherry picking all of the best memories and using that as a way to say like, yeah, we love your work. Here are all of the best memories that we remember from it. And now kind of like with the second watch, kind of like the theory that I mentioned, I'm wondering whether or not the secret is that they struggle to process negative emotions. And so it's just the positive ones that rise to the top. And so it is true to them that if like all the memories that they focus on for this book series are the positive ones, then sure, it's the best. Everything will be the best if that's the case. And that could explain, a question we talked about last week. There was something in our comments where somebody was like, that there's like people that have been wronged that are like joining with the people that have wronged them. And like, wouldn't this be terrible to like live with all of this, like, shared trauma? And maybe they legitimately can't, I don't know if it's like suppressed. I don't know if it's just like so difficult for them to consume that they just don't. But it does seem like to me, off of the second watch, it seems like they are genuine about the fact that they really do love her works.
Right. Well, and okay, so this would be, I don't know if they would experiment with this in the show, but an interesting dynamic that they could play with would be like, I would say using a book that is relatively hated by most people in like Mein Kampf. If you use something like that, like I'm sure there are some people that are joined that love that book. Could they say like, actually, like that one, we're kind of going to say like, because of the hateful message that it's preaching, we're going to just say that like, we don't love that book. Like it would be an interesting dynamic of like how they would interact with something like that.
But we potentially see it with like the way that they deal with Carol, as destructive as Carol has continually been to the others, as negative as she continually is with them, they are just like eternal optimists and they see nothing but the best in her. The first time that she kind of breaks them and and she ends up, seeing all the people that are messed up, and there's the one guy that's like hanging from the crane that's being dragged along the building, and he finally comes to, and she apologizes, and he kind of like brushes it off like, no, it's
We're
okay,
good.
it's all good. They treat her like she is great. So I don't know if it's that kind of like eternal optimism, but it was interesting seeing as Carol like finally figures out their truthfulness, as she realized that like this can be their biggest weakness, and if she can exploit this potentially, then she can really have a potential plan. Like this is the first time that she really has an idea of how to go forward, and I think that this kind of goes back to like who she is of being like a writer. I loved seeing that board that she had.
Yeah. It was very cool.
I loved it, but I think that as a writer, potentially she's used to like going through multiple edits, like
Right.
she has like a rough draft. I'm sure that there are like problems that she comes up with of like, how do I connect these stories, or like this isn't working, how do I deal with it? Like it's a very creative job, and something that I think forces you to like iterate, deal with obstacles, be able to like pivot, and I feel like we're really seeing that, like that first attempt she did with like the English speakers was like her rough draft of an idea, and I think that was garbage, and she like scrapped that. And so she went back to the drawing board and she's like, okay, let me do my next attempt to like crack this.
Yeah. I do think that she is uniquely poised to deal with this. Like, I don't think that she, has the most equipped mind to like deal with like the biological nature of an RNA sequence code to be like, all right, let's create a cure. But the way that she figures out that they can be changed, she
Yes.
starts figuring out, okay, they can't lie to me. And so now I'm going to ask a question in both ways to
Right.
see if she answers one way or the other. And a non-answer is an answer in a way. Cause like, if it was no, she would just say no.
Yeah.
But she can use that like that reasoning to deduce what is like an effective way. And I think that puts her in a very unique position to save the world.
This section was absolutely great. She's finally gathered some interesting intel that like she really thinks she can use against them. And now we see her questioning Zosha, and then like crafting a plan of like what to do with this information. And I absolutely loved it. And also, I think this section, if you didn't like Carol before, I think she's going to be even more unlikable to you, because I mentioned this earlier, that it's like she acts all principled of like, I want my agency, I want my freedom, but then she slips Zosha this drug without her permission.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I would agree that is probably something you shouldn't do. But you could also make
that's your position. Probably something you shouldn't do.
Listen, I'm not a doctor. I'm not administering meds. I'll never be in this position, so I could say this is something you probably shouldn't do. 100% never give anybody drugs that doesn't want drugs. But you could almost make the argument that the joining didn't ask Soja to be joined first. And so like clearly they're not going to just let her de-join them, like, right? They even have the conversation of like, you want me to become one of you, or like you want us to come back to you. So like we can already tell that they don't want to be disjoined anymore. So like if Carol disjoins them, if she comes up with a medication or some way to pull somebody out, like she's gonna have to give it to them without their permission. And I'd almost argue that this interaction, not that part, but an interaction in the hospital with Zoja earlier does make Carol Carol more likable in the
Okay.
sense, and here's my argument. So Carol has been very like, I don't like these people. I don't care about these people. Like, never has seemed helpful to them. They've always been helping her.
Yeah.
And we see Zoja struggling with the milk, and Carol opens the milk and like she does a nice thing. And I think, yes, Carol has her rough edges around her and she's thrown into this really like bad situation that she wants to correct. And so that creates this desperateness of like, I'm going to give this drug to Zoja to see if I can just get her out of there. If I can, pull her away from the collective, get some more answers, then maybe I can solve this thing. But yet even with that rough, crazy exterior, she still does kind things.
I mean, I think that's potentially out of guilt. I don't think that's out of kindness, because she certainly never did anything kind before that. She wasn't, like we saw.
I disagree. I think she was kind to
Okay.
her fans. I think that like, even though she was bitter and hateful towards her fans, she was still very kind and appeasing to them and telling them which pages to go on, taking photos with them. Like, I think that, yes, Carol has rough edges and she can be kind of curmudgeon-y, but I think deep down she has a good heart and she is a good person.
I agree with you, but I like her. I
Oh,
think
I like
that
her
like
too.
there, we had somebody in the comments that said that she is worse than Joffrey. We had, somebody else in the comments that said that like they don't like her, like they're having trouble kind of connecting with her. And I think that the extreme measures that she took this episode and the damage it ended up doing, like this is worse than the damage from the grenade. And she had time to think about this. This isn't like the grenade where it happened, in the middle of the night after she'd like taken Xanax and she's not like really thinking about it and she's like zoned out in front of the TV. She had time to think of this plan. And the plan that she thought of was to give somebody that is like not quite critically injured, but kind of close, drugs, and not thought about like, okay, well, what if her body is not at its peak right now, and so this could do damage to her that wouldn't normally happen, so she doesn't seem to respect them just because they are the hive mind. It's almost like they don't matter to her. She's going to return them back to who they were at any cost. She wants to do to them what they want to do to her, which is she wants to turn them without their permission. They're saying no. They say they don't want, they say they want this. And she's like, I know better.
But there is the argument that they originally put this on the people before, so like they didn't get a choice. And
I agree with her. I just think that like if you already think that she's unlikable by the end of this episode, potentially you are really going to hate her.
Oh, see, because I felt I liked her more after this episode, and not because the drugs thing, because that is a little messed up. That I will say is messed up. But I also see like she feels backed into a corner, and like she has access to Soja, like as a like friend type basis. Even though one of the things she wrote on her board was don't have favorites, don't no favoritism, which I think that's just her reminding her to like not like Soja. But
well, I think that was like they couldn't choose between her and Kumba, even though they could see that like Kumba was really being a piece of crap.
Oh, so they were saying that she doesn't choose.
She was saying that they don't have favorites.
See, I read that,
which we saw that with the whole like novel thing of like they can't have a favorite between her trash novels and Shakespeare.
Right. So I had taken it when she had wrote that. I forget the exact wording it says. I thought it was her saying that she can't have like that she should not have favorites of them.
Like, I don't, because that board is like what I know about them or something like that.
Right. That makes more sense in the context. And that actually makes way more sense. But like, I think she was in this, cornered position. She has access to Soja. And Soja has an IV drip. Like, if you're ever going to inject them with a drug that could potentially pull them out and get more info and more questions that they're not willing to offer up freely, this might be your one and only opportunity, because you're not getting close to any other one, and you're not going to be able to inject them with this anesthesia that's going to like create this fog. And so I think that desperate times, desperate measures.
And I think she even potentially thought that she was doing the right thing. I think that she potentially really believes that they are delusional, that there is like something about the psychic glue that is changing their thought process. And so it's not really them. And so I think she has potentially in her head, she's like made herself believe this idea of like, I might be saving Zosha. And like, once she disconnects, she will thank me. Not like she might thank me, but like it is what it's so funny, because it is like, she is doing exactly what they are doing. And yet she thinks that they are so terrible for doing it. And the thing that I think on the second watch that like really solidified for me that they don't have a hidden agenda and they don't have like malice and they really are good and they can't process like negative emotions was when Zosha is dying. They can't stop Carol because I think they're worried that they will upset her. They can't save one of their own people because they're worried that in so doing, they would make Carol upset.
I mean, they do ask for permission.
They exactly like they can't just like step in and like grab Zosha and like help her. The most that they can do is plead. They just keep saying, please, Carol.
And they're all crying.
Please, Carol. They're all crying, but they cannot cross that line. And when she says back up, they do, even though one of their own people is dying in front of them. And when they finally get her to understand that Zosha's going through heart failure, they still have to say, may we save her?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
you know, I go back and forth if they have an agenda or not, because it does. Like, what if it's like a base programming of like, because they have this imperative that we have to change everybody, that to make sure that this extra body, which is like an extra source of knowledge, an extra source of experience, and we eventually want to get inside this body. And so we will do like we've already got Zosha, right? We've already got all of Zosha's memories and her existence. So if we lose Zosha, that's okay, because we don't have Carol, and we need the experience of Carol. And then part of also kind of going back to your thing of like lying by omission, Carol brings up to Soja and says, when you were talking to me as secretary, defense guy, I get you guys are all connected, you know, whatever. She says that like, you said you didn't really know how it works. Do you know now? And instead of like being forthcoming and being like, yeah, we know it works this way, she says, yeah, we have a better understanding. So it's like that. I'm not going to tell you the new stuff we know, that like how we understand this connection. So to me, that feels a little nefarious. It feels like they're hiding a little bit. So like, I don't know. It also just seems so unnatural that it feels evil.
I go back and forth on it. I'm curious what your thoughts on this are. Do you think that they have, you know, some kind of nefarious intention? Do you not? I do want to briefly say that I have very much enjoyed some of the humor in this. Mm-hmm. The humor is so interesting. Like, I think that some of it is kind of like Vince's storytelling, where it's like humor that arises because you see something that is confusing, but at the same time makes sense the moment that you see it. Like, so it's like when they talk to Carol through the radio. First of all, like when I first heard that, I was like, it kind of surprised me, but then it also instantly made sense. And it's like, of course they know that she took this car, and of course they're going to use it as a way to like, just like further reach out and try and make like good ties. But it's something that kind of like surprises you in the moment. And the moment you think about it, it's like, yeah, that makes 100% sense. Like that made me laugh. And then I don't know, there's like funny things that come out of like when she takes the, the truth serum and she starts complaining about Zosha being annoying, and she's hearing herself complaining about it, and she's nodding her head like, yes, finally somebody's speaking the truth.
She gets it. That girl gets it.
That girl gets it. And just like the way that she's nodding at herself, but then she sees something that she didn't expect to hear and didn't want to hear, of like how fuckable Zosha is, and she like turns off the recording. well, that's like, I guess it is honesty.
Well, so I love that scene overall because I feel like Carol feels very reserved with who she is, right? Like I don't feel like we've seen her deal with like the problem of like losing Helen by just like drinking the problem away and like throwing herself into, digging her a grave. But we haven't really seen her like mourn Helen. And in this moment, we saw like a version of Carol that I don't think we'll ever see again. And it's only because we had this like veil of either drugs or truth, if however you want to look at it. But it felt like it was a way of seeing what Carol's really thinking and going through, and how she's experiencing this world and how she's experiencing the joining, and every piece of it. We got to see like a glimpse of how she really feels and not just what she tells us or the joined.
Yeah, I think that she's realized that she's in such a crappy situation that I think her like fight or flight response has gone in, and all the endorphins that flood in from that have prevented her from like really being able to process it. And I think that, finally having the drugs kind of like break her walls down, I think allowed her to finally weep about it. And you could see that it was tough for her to watch that. But I think because she was like so focused on, her goal of like seeing if this thing really works or not, that she didn't let it like get to her too much. She was like still in that moment. She can't let go the way that the version of her that was on those drugs was able to let go.
Right. So yeah, I thought it was a cool peek into Carol, how she feels, how she thinks. And I think that she does think that pirate lady is fuckable. And that's why she didn't want her to go with, what's his name?
Yeah.
Kumba.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see where they go with Carol and Soja dynamic, especially after what just happened.
Right.
But with that, I think our journey has come to an end. Thank you folks so much for joining along. Come back on Monday, November 24th at 6:30 Pacific time, PM. We are doing a live episode to answer your questions the best that we can about Pluribus and engage with you and your thoughts, where we think the show's going, what we think of the joining, what we think of Carol, and we look forward to having you join us then. But until that time, I'm Mark. This is Sterling.
Thanks.